The shots came at 2:30 in the morning, 3 of them, in succession, on the 5th floor of the Savoy Hotel, London, where kings had supped and emperors had slept. A man in evening dress had staggered into the corridor, turned once toward the lift, and fallen. By the time the night porter reached him, the pistol was still warm. The woman who had fired it was standing 3 feet away. She was calm. She was 30 years old. She had come a very long way to arrive at this moment. And in 11 weeks' time, a jury of 12 men would decide she had done nothing wrong. Hello, everyone. Before we start, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you are watching from and what time it is there. Your support truly helps us continue bringing you stories like this one. Now, let us begin. It was the first day of July, 1923, in London, England. The capital had not yet shaken off the weight of the war years, though the streets made every effort to appear as though it had. Along the Strand, the plane trees were thick with summer leaf, and the smell of horse dung and motor exhaust mingled on warm pavements. Doormen in brass-buttoned coats stood at attention before the great hotels. The Thames moved slowly to the south, broad and brown and indifferent. Into this city came a woman who had made herself from almost nothing. Marguerite Alibert, known in certain drawing rooms as Madame Fahmy, arrived at the Savoy Hotel on the 1st of July with her husband, Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey of Egypt, a man of immense wealth, 22 years of age, and 9 days left to live. She was 30. She had known poverty, disgrace, and labour that polite society preferred not to name. She had clawed her way through every stratum that Paris placed before her, and she had arrived finally at the steps of one of the world's most celebrated establishments. She came with a secretary, a valet, and a maid. She came with a Louis Vuitton travelling case and a Browning semi-automatic pistol. She did not come intending to stay long. There is a particular kind of woman that a certain kind of city produces, a woman who understands, from girlhood, that beauty is a currency, and that currency must be managed with more care than money. Marguerite Alibert understood this before she had a name for it. She had been born in the 9th arrondissement of Paris on the 9th of December, 1890. Her father drove a carriage, while her mother kept house for others. She grew up in rooms that smelled of damp plaster and boiled cabbage, watching the carriages of the wealthy clatter past on streets she could not afford to cross with any dignity. She watched. She remembered. She did not intend to remain. At 15, tragedy came without warning. A younger brother, 4 years of age, was struck dead by a motor vehicle on a Parisian street. The family, already frayed at every seam, sent Marguerite to a Catholic boarding establishment, the Sisters of Mary, where she was assigned as a domestic servant to prosperous households during the day, and returned to the institution's supervision at night. She washed floors. She carried laundry. She noted carefully how the comfortable classes arranged their lives. Within a year she was expelled. She would not name the father of the child she carried. In 1897 she delivered a daughter she named Raymond. She was 17 years old and entirely without support. It was said she was beautiful. It was observed that she knew how to make a room go quiet when she entered it. She noted these facts about herself and filed them accordingly. By 1908 she had found her way into the employ of Madame Dina, proprietress of the Maison de Rendezvous, a house of discreet arrangement catering to an exclusive clientele in the fashionable quarters of the city. She became, in the careful parlance of the age, a courtesan of the highest order. She was meticulous about her dress. She was precise about her words. She sent Raymond to boarding school in England with money earned by means that did not require explanation in the circles she now inhabited. In April of 1917, at the Hotel Crillon in Paris, she was introduced to a young officer of the Grenadier Guards. He was 22 years of age. He was the Prince of Wales. For several months letters passed between them, letters indiscreet in their content, intimate in their address, and signed only with the letter E. By the war's end, the prince had returned to England and taken up with another. Marguerite was left with his correspondence and her own considerable resolve. She was not ruined. She was, if anything, more determined than before. In 1921, she married a Frenchman named Charles Laurent. She divorced him within the year, and received a financial settlement of sufficient size to sustain the manner of life she intended to maintain. In 1922, accompanying a business acquaintance on a journey to Egypt, she encountered Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey at a social engagement in Cairo. He was 20 years of age, exceptionally wealthy, and entirely captivated. She recognized what she saw. They were married in December of 1922, first in a civil ceremony, then the following month in a ceremony conducted according to Islamic rite. Before the wedding, Marguerite had, by her own later account, signed documents waiving her right to divorce under Egyptian law. She said she had not understood what she was signing. She said many things. The household in Cairo was large. There were maids, a secretary, a valet, and attendants whose specific function was not recorded in the staff ledgers. The rooms were magnificent. The life was, by external measure, one of extraordinary privilege. Staff who served the palazzo reported that the French lady covered bruises on her neck with face powder most mornings. The prince's secretary was observed on several occasions with scratches upon his forearms. The couple's arguments carried through the walls of their residence with sufficient regularity that the servants ceased to remark upon them in their daily reports. Marguerite had begun keeping a diary. In it she recorded what she described as cruelties, indignities, and demands she found unendurable. It was also noted by those same staff members that after each quarrel the couple would reconcile before nightfall, and that no formal complaint to any authority was ever made. Nothing more was thought of it. Nothing more is ever thought of it when it occurs behind the doors of the very wealthy. By June of 1923, the marriage had endured for 7 months. Marguerite wrote to a friend in Paris, the letter unsigned, the authorship disputed, advising that she should not return to Egypt. She spoke of the country's morals. She spoke of fearing for her life. The letter was preserved. It would be produced in court. On the 9th of July they attended a performance of The Merry Widow at Daly's Theatre. London in summer smelled of lime blossom and warm stone. They sat together and listened to the music. They returned to the hotel in good spirits, or in what those who observed them took for good spirits. Then something was said in the corridor, when the particulars were never established to universal satisfaction. By 2:30 in the morning, 3 shots had been fired on the 5th floor of the Savoy Hotel. The night porter heard them. So did the lift operator. So did every guest on that floor who was not yet asleep. The night porter, a man named John Paul Beatty, reached the 5th floor corridor within 2 minutes of the final report. He found Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey lying upon the carpet in his evening clothes. 3 bullets had struck him, 1 to the neck, 1 to the back, 1 to the head. He was breathing, but without consciousness. Blood had spread across the carpet in a radius that the porter would later describe in his deposition with careful restraint. Madame Fahmy stood 3 feet away. She held a semi-automatic Browning pistol, model of 1910, and 7 rounds had been in the magazine. 3 had been discharged, 4 remained. She was described by the porter and by the 2 additional members of staff who arrived within the following minutes as calm. One witness said she appeared dazed. These are not, it should be observed, incompatible states. The hotel physician was summoned and attended to the prince where he lay. An ambulance was directed to the Strand entrance. By 3 o'clock in the morning, Prince Ali Fahmy Bey had been conveyed to Charing Cross Hospital. He did not survive the journey. He was 22 years of age. Madame Fahmy was taken to Bow Street Police Station before dawn. She was interviewed through an interpreter. She maintained throughout that her command of English was insufficient for formal proceedings. She stated that her husband had attacked her in the corridor. She stated that she had raised the pistol and fired without knowing how many times the mechanism discharged. She stated that she had not intended what occurred. She was charged with willful murder. The pistol was sealed in evidence. The spent cartridge cases were collected from the corridor and catalogued. The hotel rooms were secured. Each member of staff present that night was interviewed individually, statements taken in full, and forwarded to the coroner's office. The prince's secretary provided a formal account of the evening's movements, from the theatre to supper, to the moment the household retired. He stated that he had heard raised voices through the wall. He did not state what was said. The hotel register was consulted. Arrival dates, room assignments, our account settlements, each entry copied and forwarded in the correct order to the relevant offices. Everything was documented, ordered, and sealed. The procedure was thorough. It was correct. It did not bring Prince Ali Fahmy Bey back to life. The inquest was opened. The matter was set to proceed to the Central Criminal Court. The post-mortem examination was conducted by the divisional surgeon in attendance at Charing Cross Hospital in the early hours of the 10th of July 1923. The findings were submitted formally to the coroner's office and entered into the record without amendment. 3 bullet wounds were documented and mapped. The first had entered the neck at a trajectory consistent with a man facing partially away from the shooter or turning at the moment of discharge. The second had entered the back, aimed squarely, at a downward angle. The third had struck the posterior of the skull. The examining physician stated in his report that any one of the 3 wounds might, under different circumstances, have proved fatal in isolation. The combination had produced death with certainty, and within minutes of the final shot being fired. The Browning pistol was examined separately by a ballistics officer. It was a semi-automatic of a pattern sold freely on the continent during the years preceding and following the Great War, and requiring no particular license for purchase in France. The registration was traced. 3 rounds discharged, 4 remaining. The mechanism was found to be in full working order. A further medical examination was conducted upon Madame Fahmy herself by the physician attached to Holloway Prison, where she was held on remand. He found 3 abrasions on the back of her neck. 3 abrasions. He described them as consistent, in his professional opinion, with forcible contact applied by a hand or hands. He noted them in his report with clinical precision. He did not speculate as to their origin or timing. He observed, he recorded, he moved on. 3 shots fired, 3 wounds documented, 3 marks upon her neck. Whether these numbers constituted a pattern or a coincidence would be, in 11 weeks' time, a matter for 12 men in a box. The investigation file was sealed and forwarded to the public prosecutor's office. The date of trial was set for the 11th of September, 1923, at the Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, before Mr. Justice Swift. If you are finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so please do let us know your thoughts on this case below. Now let us continue. Marguerite Fahmy was remanded to Holloway Prison in the weeks that followed. She was observed by staff to be composed, though she presented herself at every opportunity as a woman on the edge of collapse. She secured the services of Sir Edward Marshall Hall, King's Counsel, the most celebrated criminal defence barrister then practising at the English bar, a man who had obtained acquittals in cases of formidable difficulty before, and who understood, with the precision of a craftsman, exactly what a jury could be made to feel. He accepted her instructions. He read the evidence. He understood what was needed. The trial opened on the 11th of September, 1923, at the Central Criminal Court, London. The presiding judge was Mr. Justice Swift. The prosecution was led by Percival Clark, King's Counsel. The defence was conducted by Sir Edward Marshall Hall. The public interest was, from the first morning, beyond anything the court administration had prepared for. Queues formed on the pavements outside the Old Bailey before 5 o'clock in the morning. Those fortunate enough to gain entry to the public gallery arrived early and departed at each adjournment with reluctance. Seats were said to have exchanged hands for sums that would have kept a working family in coal for a full winter. The case of the Egyptian prince shot dead by his French wife in the Savoy Hotel was, the newspapers agreed, the story of the year. Percival Clark opened for the Crown with precision. The facts were not disputed. The defendant had been found holding the pistol. Hotel staff had been present. 3 bullets had entered the body of Prince Ali Fahmy Bey. The matter was, Clark submitted, one of wilful murder, and the jury ought not to be distracted from that essential truth. Sir Edward Marshall Hall rose and proceeded to make distraction into an art form. He did not contest what had happened. He contested what it had meant. He constructed, across 5 days of proceedings, a portrait of a woman destroyed by the institution of her own marriage, a slight, educated Frenchwoman subjected to months of cruelty, degradation, and physical violence at the hands of a powerful and ungovernable Egyptian prince who had lured her with promises of palaces and then treated her as property. He read from the diary. He produced the unsigned letter from Paris. He described the abrasions on her neck. He described the laws of Egypt that had stripped her, upon marriage, of every legal recourse available to a European woman. Then, on the third day of the trial, Sir Edward retrieved the Browning pistol from the evidence table. He held it before the jury. He demonstrated its mechanism, the weight of it, the resistance of the trigger, the speed with which it could discharge, and in doing so, briefly and, as he later maintained, accidentally directed the barrel toward the public gallery. He asked the jury whether a woman who raised such a weapon in terror of her life could be said, in conscience and in law, to have committed murder. The prosecution sought to establish that greed, and not fear, had governed Marguerite's conduct from first to last. They were largely unsuccessful. The defendant gave evidence through an interpreter. She was pale. She appeared to tremble at intervals. She said that she had raised her arm and fired, and that she had not known how many times, and that she had not understood what she had done until the moment was past. The jury deliberated for 55 minutes. The foreman delivered the verdict, not guilty. The gallery erupted into applause. Mr. Justice Swift reprimanded the court, cleared the gallery, then turned to the defendant and informed her, in the language of the court, that she was free. She was acquitted of wilful murder. The verdict reached Cairo by telegram within the hour of its pronouncement. The Egyptian government's response was formal, sustained, and furious. Officials protested through diplomatic channels against the conduct mounted by the defense, the systematic presentation of Egyptian character as savage, of Egyptian custom as barbaric, of Egyptian law as the instrument of a tyrant rather than the architecture of a civilization. It was observed in correspondence preserved in the Foreign Office records that the trial had been less a proceeding in law than a performance in prejudice, and that the verdict reflected not the evidence but the atmosphere Sir Edward Marshall Hall had so carefully cultivated over 5 days. The British press was rather more celebratory. The newspapers described Madame Fahmy's acquittal with a warmth they made little effort to conceal. Popular papers devoted their front pages to it for a week. She was depicted as brave. She was depicted as wronged. She was depicted, by the illustrated weeklies, as a small, fragile woman who had done what any woman in her position would have been compelled to do. No newspaper mentioned the Prince of Wales. It had been understood, in the way that certain things are understood in England without ever being stated aloud, that the Prince's correspondence with Madame Fahmy, amorous in character, indiscreet in content, signed only with the letter E, was not to form any part of the proceedings. The Prince himself had been dispatched to Canada for the duration of the trial. It was said, in corridors that did not find their way into any public record, that a representative of the royal household had visited Holloway Prison during the weeks of remand. What passed between that representative and the prisoner was not documented. The letters were not produced at trial. They were reportedly destroyed following Marguerite's death on the 2nd of January 1971. The record does not confirm this. Marguerite returned to Paris. She appeared in several small French films in the years that followed. She lived in an apartment with a view of the Ritz. She was seen at dinners, at the theatre, at the sort of evening engagements to which she had devoted the greater portion of her life to gaining access. She had been born the daughter of a coachman in a Paris that barely knew her name, and she died in that same city, at the age of 80, with rather more of it than she had started with. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey was 22 years of age when he died on the carpet of the Savoy Hotel. He had written letters to his wife that the prosecution described as evidence of profound devotion. They were read in part, set aside, and not dwelt upon. He was buried in Cairo. His name faded from the English newspapers within a fortnight. Within a year it was recalled only by those who had reason to recall it. The Savoy Hotel replaced its carpets. New guests arrived. The Thames moved on, as it always moves on, broad and brown, and indifferent to the administrative requirements of sudden death. In the archives of the Central Criminal Court, the file sits bound and catalogued, the pistol's disposal noted, the correspondence closed. Outside, the plane trees turn. As they turn every autumn, without ceremony, without comment, without memory,